people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. We're going to kick it off with the minimum weight title fight between Yoka Valle, the champion, and Annabelle Ortiz, the former champion, the challenger, in what seems to have been a voluntary title defense. And I told you ahead of the fight, the difference, what's going to make all the difference is freshness and speed. Yoka Valle is the younger fighter, the fresher fighter, and in all likelihood, Annabelle Ortiz will be second best. That's very much what we saw. Yoka a lot faster than Annabelle Ortiz, quicker to the draw, quicker in the exchange, getting through with punches here and there, though things did get quite messy mid-range to inside. There was a lot of clinching.
Wrestling.
Both fighters would go to trade punches with each other, overshooting the distance and ending up entangled in each other's arms. This happened several times throughout the course of the fight, though the cleaner punches, the clearer punches, were coming from Yoka Valle.
The difference in hand speed was noticeable. Difference in hand speed, foot speed. We saw some foot feints.
Yoka being a more athletic fighter than Annabelle Ortiz, a more active fighter as well. This was Yoka's third fight of this year. She's fought 3 times this year, whereas Annabelle, she hasn't seen action since late last year, ahead of this fight.
So not only was she the older fighter in the fight, older by 5 or 6 years, but she was the far less active fighter in the fight. Still durable, still tough enough to take Yoka Valle's best, but not enough to win a points decision. It's what I expected.
Because the aging champion Annabelle Ortiz could not contend with Yoka's hand speed, she consistently elected to smother, initiate the clinches, hit, then hold, making it a messy affair. But Yoka Valle still pulling away and still showing the cleaner punches, the cleaner work. It was a very rough and rugged fight in front of a very much engaged crowd, urging their champion on. Yoka Valle, a hometown favorite and a big draw in Costa Rica whenever she did get in with a clean right hand.
They made their presence felt.
Not necessarily a hard fight to score, but still a hard night's work for Yoka Valle, who successfully defended both her WBO and IBF titles, but labored a bit more with Annabelle Ortiz than Senicia Estrada did. Annabelle is a common opponent between them, and I told you, Yoka's gonna have a harder time with Annabelle than Senicia did. She'll win the fight, she'll win on points, but she's gonna struggle with Annabelle, and that's what she did. Congratulations to her. Here's looking forward to what could be Valle versus Estrada in the coming year. It's the biggest fight and the only fight that makes sense at this point at minimum weight. And we'll see if we get it. Now, elsewhere in the world of boxing yesterday, in Monaco, the Matchroom show, we saw the rematch between Ramla Ali and Alejandra Guzman. And as I stated in my prediction video, I felt that Ramla Ali would get it right the second time out. She'd figure it out. In the first round, you saw Alejandra Guzman, very confident, very strong, stepping into her jab and pushing with the jab, trying to pressure Ramla Ali with activity. Alejandra got off to a good start. I gave Alejandra the first round on volume. I gave Ramla the second off of good right hands landed and good defense mid-range to inside. Good smothering tactics in the second round. I gave Ramla the third round. She just nicked it for me off head movement and clean punching.
Clean counters, though Alejandra Guzman still looked dangerous.
2 rounds to 1 in favor of Ramla Ali after 3. 2 rounds to 2 after 4. Tie score as Alejandra Guzman stunned Ramla Ali in the pocket, mid-range to inside. Ramla was visibly hurt towards the end of the round.
Serviced as a reminder for Ramla Ali in the fight that Alejandra Guzman is the much bigger puncher of the two, and she can't afford to take chances with her.
2 rounds to 2 after 4, tie score. 3-2 after 5, with Ramla Ali edging the 5th round for me off defense and clean punching. Head movement, bobbing and weaving under the sweeping hooks was a big deal in this fight.
It made a difference. The 5th round looked like a swing round to me. Alejandra got off to a good start. I believe Alejandra got off to a good start, but Ramla got off to a good finish. And it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
At least, for me it is. That if this same fight happening the same way would have been happening south of the border in Mexico, well, maybe the judges would have gave Alejandra that round. But let's not forget who the house fighter here. The house fighter is Ramla, so I figured she'd get consideration from the judges.
I thought the 5th round was a swing round, so I swung it to the house fighter. I swung it to Ramla.
Gave Ramla Ali the 6th round, a strong round for her. Good defense, good movement, good counters, and Guzman was becoming frustrated. I gave Ramla the 6th round. I gave Ramla the 7th round, what was arguably her most dominant round once again. Great defense, great counters, and Guzman was actually hurt towards the end of the round.
The 8th round seemed like a swing round to me. Could have swung it to Alejandra, could have swung it to Ramla. I swung it to Ramla because she finished the round strong, managed to steal the round in my eyes, and I had Ramla clearly ahead.
After 9 rounds, I gave the 10th and final round to Alejandra Guzman, who was just a lot busier and a lot more aggressive. Ramla Ali won a points decision. As I predicted, what made all the difference was head movement in the pocket. Instead of trading punches with Alejandra Guzman, which really isn't a good idea, you hear it all the time, you don't hook with a hooker. What Ramla Ali changed for this rematch was she spent more time bobbing and weaving under the sweeping hooks.
Then countering, punching out of the guard.
We saw some of the same things working for her in the second fight that were working in the first. Good jabs, good straight right hands, good strong ones. But what really made all the difference was bobbing and weaving under the sweeping hooks instead of catching them on the arms and gloves.
Just catching and shooting out of a high guard, trying to, leaving yourself open for other hooks. This time, Ramla did a good job of just getting under those hooks.
Still moving and still jabbing, getting off those right hands. A little bit more bobbing and weaving instead of catching and shooting is what made the difference here for Ramla Ali. Looks to have been a 7-3 to a 6-4 kind of fight, 6-4 with 2 swing rounds.
Still competitive, though, no complaints from me. I think the right woman won the fight. She just nicked it.
Against a dangerous puncher. There's a precedence for a rubber match. There is a precedence for a third fight between them, though. I don't think there will be. I think Ramla's gonna move on.
Congratulations to her for living up to my expectations.
Knew she could pull it off, though. It wouldn't be easy. Now, on the undercard of that same show, you saw South Africa's then IBF light flyweight champion Nontshinga take on Mexico's own Adrian Curiel, who upset the apple cart for Nontshinga off a clean right hand over the top of Nontshinga's jab in just the 2nd round. Knocked him down, sent him to the canvas where the referee immediately waved it off, thinking he would not recover. And you know, Nontshinga was a young champion, a newly crowned champion, and the fight ending the way that it did, as abruptly as it did, it doesn't leave you with much to reflect upon except some post-fight comments from boxing insider Rick Glacier, who reacted to the knockout by saying Eddie Hearn just doesn't learn. He keeps having Mexican journeymen, no-name opponents, destroy his world champions and attractions. Another one on the deck on Saturday, what seems like a cheap criticism, a cheap comment, because what's the alternative? Matching his guys softer, keeping them safer? It's precisely that kind of matchmaking we see too much of in America. It's precisely that kind of matchmaking that led Showtime to leave the sport of boxing. Now, Showtime is out of the sport, and what you're telling Eddie is he needs to match his guys softer and safer, like Showtime was matching their guys. Who's he talking about anyway? He's likely talking about when Mauricio Lara knocked out Josh Warrington and when he knocked out Lee Wood, not mentioning that the rematches to those fights, the Warrington fight, the Wood fight, they sold a lot of tickets with those fights. They did very good business with those rematches.
What Rick Glacier and a lot of the American boxing people here in America seem to forget is this is why we tune in.
This is why it's called the theater of the unexpected. This is what people show up to see. They don't want everything to go according to plan all of the time. That's boring. Perhaps that's why the UK boxing scene and some parts of the European boxing scene are growing and thriving as the American boxing scene is dwindling because it's the Americans that don't get it. We don't all want to see the same script, everything going to plan all the time, and what you're suggesting is that Eddie should match his guys softer and safer so that this doesn't happen?
Rick's got valuable insights when it comes to other subjects other than Eddie Hearn. He seems to have an axe to grind with that guy, and I don't know why when Eddie's doing just fine.
He's doing shows in Monaco, shows in the UK, shows in the US, shows in Australia. They just inked a pact with some people over there in Japan, the people at Matchroom. Eddie's doing just fine, but how are the Americans doing and all of their insights on matchmaking? How's business?
When Mauricio Lara knocked out Josh Warrington, it's not like Matchroom suffered or Matchroom was at a loss as a result. They actually had options on Mauricio Lara.
He became one of their fighters and subsequently one of their champions and fought in some decent-sized fights. The Warrington rematch, the 2 Lee Wood fights, these were all very entertaining fights. And Matchroom made some very good shows, very good money from those fights. You're saying that Eddie shouldn't match his fighters against tough Mexican sluggers, but if he didn't, we would have never got Ramla Ali versus Guzman. 1 and 2, those were both good fights. Seems to me that Rick is just looking for something negative to say about Eddie Hearn because he's always saying negative things about Eddie Hearn. I don't know why, and his criticisms oftentimes, they don't even make sense.
What are you telling him to do? Match his guys softer? That's what boxing needs right now. More soft matchmaking?
Things not going to plan are what create excitement within the sport. Nontshinga getting upset in just 2 rounds. That sends shockwaves throughout the men's light flyweight division, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell Rick is talking about.
And finally, we come to the IBF Super Featherweight title fight on that same card. That card's main event, the fight between Joe Cordina, the champion, and Vasquez, the challenger. A fight where I felt it's either Vasquez just won a decision or the fight's a draw. But I didn't see Joe Cordina beat this guy, I didn't. I saw Joe get off to a good start. Mid-range to inside, good combinations, good hooks, good uppercuts. In the first half of the fight, he looked real strong, and he actually hurt Vasquez at least 2 times. Joe looked sharp at the start, but not towards the second half, not towards the end.
Vasquez, who looked in spots like he might get knocked out, he turned the tide. He ended up looking the busier fighter in the fight.
What you started to see was Vasquez initiating a lot of the action, good head movement, mid-range to inside, good combinations. After a while, it was Vasquez taking the reins and taking over towards the tail end of the fight. And as stated, for me and my money, it's either you scored this fight a draw or Vasquez wins on points. Vasquez does just enough to win a decision. I feel like Joe Cordina, I feel like Joe dodged a bullet here, that he started off strong, but seems to have faded a bit in the second half. Perhaps accents that Joe is struggling to make this weight. He's outgrowing the weight.
In tandem with Vasquez being a bit better than people thought, than people anticipated. He acquitted himself well.
This was intended to be a quick run out for Joe, just to keep busy fight. Nothing too difficult, nothing too dangerous, but it turned out to be a hard night's work for Joe Cordina, who, if you saw him at the weigh-in, he looked dry, he looked sunken in. This looks to have been a hard cut. He's already spent some time campaigning as a super featherweight, and his body might be urging him to move up to lightweight, but he might stick around. He might stick around for at least one more fight, one more night opposite the ring, Lee Wood, because that's the talk of the town. Lee Wood, former WBA featherweight champion, is heading up to super featherweight. Word around the campfire is his first fight at the weight might be with Joe. That's a big money fight.
What about O'Shaquie Foster?
Joe's not interested in O'Shaquie Foster. Joe Cordina says he's not financially motivated to fight O'Shaquie. He's a good fighter, but I'm not making no money fighting him.
O'Shaquie Foster, WBC super featherweight champion, who was last in action last weekend.
Last weekend, south of the border, opposite the ring, Rocky Hernandez. Cordina was one of the names he called out for. Not exactly surprising that Foster has always voiced his desire to fight him. Cordina hasn't said much in regards to his fellow champion, but behind the scenes, he recently revealed that the lack of monetary backing stopped their unification from becoming a reality. Only people in Texas know who you are, said Cordina to Boxing Social. I tried to make that fight in the summer. Eddie Hearn said, there's no money in that fight. It can't be made. No one really knows him over there or over here.
So it's Eddie Hearn that poured water all over the goddamn thing.
Cold water. Oshaki Foster gave a great account of himself south of the border last weekend opposite the ring Rocky Hernandez in what was, for me and my money, a fight of the year candidate, one of the best rounds of the year, the 11th round. He showed how formidable and dangerous he really is. And if you're Joe Cordina, while that might be a unification match, it is true that Oshaki's not that well known here, and he doesn't have a major financial backer behind him. He's a network and promotional free agent. At this time, there's no money attached to him.
So maybe Matchroom can pick him up, though as far as Joe and Joe fighting him, Joe's not interested.
These comments were made ahead of this weekend's fight. And ahead of this weekend's fight, Joe said, it's a tough fight, in reference to the Foster fight, the Oshaki-Foster fight. I'm not saying it's not a tough fight. I rate him. He is a good fighter. But at the same time, I'm not making no money from it. I need to change my kids' lives. And that's about as honest as he can be. Because there's not a lot of money, a lot of profile attached to an Oshaki-Foster fight, he's not interested. And when you think about the other champions at the weight, like Hector Luis Garcia...
He doesn't have much of a profile either. You could say the same to a lesser extent about Emmanuel Navarrete, this division's WBO champion. So, is that saying that Joe's not interested in unifying with anyone?
Might not be. He might be in the process of outgrowing this weight. He just dodged a bullet with the Vasquez kid. And the only fight worth staying at 134 is a Lee Wood fight. Because a Lee Wood fight, well, that fight does have a profile. You could make a lot of money doing that thing.
Does this mean that he's ducking Oshaki Foster and the other champions?
Well, when a guy's got more time for a featherweight, moving up to super featherweight, but no time for his fellow champions, what are you supposed to say? What are you supposed to call it? Especially when he himself acknowledges that Oshaki Foster, that would be a hard fight. Oshaki is a good fighter, a very good fighter, and he rates him. In so many words, what you're saying is, I don't want to fight him because he's more trouble than he's worth. I'm not going to get much money doing that thing, and he is a good fighter. In all likelihood, Joe Cordina probably has one more fight left in him at 130 pounds. He wants it to be the Lee Wood fight because he knows you can sell that. Lee Wood is buzzing right now.
The fight with Kansu, the fight with Mick Conlon, the two fights with Mauricio Lara, the more recent fight with Josh Warrington, he's been on a tear.
He's been on some hell of a run. He's buzzing right now, and that's why Joe, likely more receptive to fighting him. He'll make more money doing it. I like Lee Wood as a fighter, a bit more than I like Joe Cordina, but I don't have any illusions about what would happen if they fight. Joe might stop him.
I like Lee Wood. I like his human interest story. I like his fights because what makes them so entertaining is that he isn't perfect. He does have his drawbacks.
Opposite the ring, Joe Cordina, I think Joe's going to be a little bit too big, a little bit too strong, and a little bit too sharp. I think that's where the fairy tale ends for Lee Wood. And afterwards, maybe Joe moves up the lightweight. He has the fight with Lee Wood in either the first or second quarter of next year, then moves up in weight in the third or the fourth.